Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video is going to concentrate on the base of operations for clandestine services CIA, San Francisco, City by the Bay, Baghdad by the Bay. San Francisco has always been involved with the military intelligence complex since at least 1850, and I'm sure if you go back before that, before Sir Francis Drake arrived over at Point Reyes in Marin County and started setting up the Father Junipero Serra mission systems in the 1700s. You can say that that also was outposts for military colonialism services, and essentially a war against the native people of Alta California, which is what it was referred to back in the 1700s. It was Alta California, which stretched down to the Baja Peninsula in Mexico. And since then we've had the Mexican-American Wars and the Spanish-American Wars, and we've redrawn the maps and we've retyped up the land grants. Very important concept in terms of military industrial complex is that you have a what I would consider to be an unholy alliance between nobility class, Illuminati class, banker class, who takes possession of all land and then subcontracts it to the military, who is the police, paramilitary services on behalf of nobility class. Remember, we have three classes, people watching my videos. Nobility class at the top, which is dominated by the bankers, who decide which economies will flourish and which economies will suffer. It's nobility. Social engineered economic principles, which are never taught at any university, at Stanford, at Harvard, at Georgetown, at University of California Systems. They do not teach economics the way it works in real life. They teach you theoretical poppycock propaganda economics that they just used to indoctrinate the second class, which is the vassal class. Those are the people that actually go into the office at the banks, work at hedge funds, work at universities, work at politics, work in corporate America. That's the vassal class, the people that actually get their fingernails a little bit dirty. But then the lower class, the working class, the serfs, the people who work the land but don't own the land, the people who work and own nothing, and they're not necessarily happy. I understand under the digital central bank currency that they want to foist upon us when they create the next economic breakdown, which they manufactured. They'll tell you you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. But right now we have a system where you own very little and you're kind of miserable. So that's the current system. What's going to be really comical for me, kind of a black comedy, gallows humor, is the vassal class, who has $50 to $100 million set aside, and they think they're pretty smart and they're pretty rich. They're going to go to zero. Their accounts are all going to zero. So they're going to be poor. I don't know how happy they're going to be, but they're going to maybe have a high social score. Except that if you study my videos, you'll realize once you get out to around age 60, it doesn't really make any difference if you have 100 million or a billion or $10 billion. You can get whacked and certainly retired. And you'll get whacked if you're considered a security risk. If you're a security risk, in other words, someone who gets a little too chatty and doesn't zip it, if you don't zip it, you get whacked. It doesn't make any difference how much money is in your so-called bank account, which you may or may not have access to. All right, so I'm going to kick off today's video before I get to Dianne Feinstein, because we've been looking at this Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi debacle, comedy, whether it's drunk driving, whether it's presiding over weddings with no masks during a lockdown in the middle of the COVID pandemic. It doesn't make any difference because, let's be honest, Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, as people are irrelevant. They're irrelevant, unimportant, unintelligent, cockroaches. That's all they are. They're nothing. They're easily replaceable, and they're going to be replaced very soon with some younger version of them. So nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change. But what I'm trying to tell you is that you can't talk about the Paul Pelosi mendacities unless you talk about the assassination of George Moscone and Harvey Milk, who's a Lithuanian Jew who works for the CIA that was transplanted into the Castro district and opened up a phony fake camera shop on Castro Street, south of Market. And he was only in San Francisco for 6 years before he gets whacked by Dan White, who gets acquitted because of the Twinkie defense. If that doesn't sound like a CIA assassination hit, I don't know what doesn't. But I'm not defending Harvey Milk. I mean, he's a social engineering CIA spook. And George Moscone was indoctrinated into the Catholic Church and set up to be a CIA spook himself. But evidently, Harvey Milk and George Moscone were not following orders. And we know from listening to Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men, we follow orders or people die. We follow orders or people die. We learned that with Sharon Tate. We learned that with Enos Mejia's daughter, Abigail Folger, right? She didn't follow orders. Sharon Tate, she didn't follow orders. Lena LaBianca, he bought a horse farm in San Diego County. Yeah, he was moving 2 hours away. He's not following orders for private banking. Maybe Paul Pelosi is not coming into the office anymore. He's 82. He's not doing the money laundering transactions like he used to do. So he's expendable completely. Now they're using him for the Casto Nudists, which is code for gay. That's code for Harvey Milk. That's code for social engineering. We have CRT, critical race theory. Well, we have critical gay theory, LGBT, transhumanism. These are just social engineering anthropology techniques to divide our society, okay? There were gays living in San Francisco before Harvey Milk rolled into town in 1972. There was 100 years of a gay community in San Francisco before Harvey Milk from New York City rolls into town. There was a music community in San Francisco before Bill Graham, a.k.a. Wolf Grudjanka, a Russian Jew, before he arrived in San Francisco in 1965. He arrived in San Francisco from New York 7 years before Harvey Milk did to promote free concerts at Sharon Meadows, named after a banker, today renamed after Robin Williams, another CIA experiment. Garroted. Thank you, Sandler Institute. You did a great job restructuring his brain. So you can't really discuss the Pelosi poppycock mendacities unless you talk about Dianne Feinstein, who her 3 husbands were, how Jewish is she, very. Where did she come from? Under a rock? Not necessarily. What's her relationship with George Moscone? What's Dianne Feinstein's relationship with Jim Jones? What's Enos Mejia's relationship with Dianne Feinstein? What's Enos Mejia's relationship with Jim Jones? And Paul Tate? And Paul Pelosi? Because we know that Dianne Feinstein's second husband, and well, scratch that, third husband, who just recently passed away this year before the Paul Pelosi DUI car crash, in February 2022, Richard Bloom passed away, and he had a relationship with Paul Pelosi, the drunkard who took out Jesus Lopez. So I'm implicating Dianne Feinstein with Paul Pelosi. Yeah! And Jim Jones, too! Jim Jones, lifetime CIA. Bill Graham, lifetime CIA. Dianne Feinstein, lifetime CIA. Her husband, financial services, money laundering, private banking. Right? Enos Mejia, private banking. Abigail Folger was being groomed for private banking. Got murdered 28 times with an M7 bayonet. Hey, I am not kidding around. You're not going to get this kind of content elsewhere. You got to come here to get this. All right, so I'm going to start off with, we were all told and we were all warned before any of these CIA events happened, because I'm going to call the Haight Ashbury Project, HAP, that is a CIA project. The ARP, the Amphetamines Research Project, that's a CIA project. Operation Overspray, where they drop chemicals from a military plane over San Francisco, that is a military CIA project. called Overspray, Operation Overspray, done out and on San Francisco, City by the Bay. The Castro Street area, when you inject a New York Harvey milk, that's a CIA project. The gays were already there, but this influx of new immigration of gay people at the exact time that Harvey Milk hits the scene, that's engineered. That's social engineering. And that's a CIA clandestine service project. See what they did? Do you know it's only a mile and 400 yards to where Patricia Hearst was kept? You know, this is Patty Hearst is going on too. You got the Patricia Hearst kidnapping going on upon the arrival of Harvey Milk to the Castro district. You have Ines Mejia trying to recover from the fact that they murdered her daughter. So there's some kind of a problem with Ines Mejia, I guess. You know, I know there was a problem with Abigail Folger not wanting to be a banker. So they whacked her. And there's a problem with Sharon Tate. So they whacked her. And you have her father, Paul Tate. You have Paul Pelosi. You have Nancy Pelosi. You have Dianne Feinstein. You have Dianne Feinstein's husband. And they're all living in the same general areas. The Haight Ashbury, Presidio Heights, Pacific Heights. Dianne Feinstein attended the Sacred Heart Convent, the Convent of the Sacred Heart at 2222 Broadway, which is 3.5 blocks from this alleged hammer attack. So Dianne Feinstein went to elementary school where the hammer attack that never happened. And that's where Dianne Feinstein lives, in that neighborhood. And there you go. You got Ines Mejia living on Broadway. You've got Fritzi Bernesh living on Broadway. You got Melvin Belli living on Broadway. And you got Paul Pelosi living on Broadway, but he really lives on Pacific Avenue. So don't be fooled, people. They have multiple homes. The bigger home with the 4-car garage is a block up the hill and about 4 blocks to the east. So don't be fooled. The Pelosi family is not going to live in a home without a view of their beloved Belvedere, which is where they really want to live, but they just can't stand driving across the bridge. They all want to live in Belvedere, so instead of living in Belvedere, they stare at Belvedere. You just look right over Alcatraz, which is their real home, and beyond the other side of Alcatraz is Belvedere, which is a part of Tiburon, where Robin Williams was murdered, suicided. I'm going to read you what excerpts from John F. Kennedy before his head was blown off. President John F. Kennedy delivered a speech to the so-called fake media. That's what they were. They're the fake media. It was called the Press Club at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City on April 27th, 1961. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate very much your generous invitation to be here tonight. I'm going to skip through this because I'll post the text of his speech below. You bear a heavy responsibility these days. An article I read some time ago reminded me of how particularly heavy the burdens of present-day events bear upon your profession. Well, let me just tell you something. Anybody that's in the media, anyone who's a presenter of the fake news, you know, that took over the mantelpiece from Walter Cronkite from the CBS Evil Eye, CBS Evening News, fake news, David Brinkley, Chet Huntley, Rachel Maddow, Bill O'Reilly. I like to put Bill O'Reilly and Rachel Maddow together because they're basically Siamese twins. They're the same person. They're the same person, except one you put lipstick on, you call her a lesbian, and the other one you call like a right-wing Republican. They're the same person. They have the same script. They're both full of poppycock. It's just that you get to pick your poison. Do I like the big bird, 6-foot tall Rachel Maddow, or do you like the 6-foot bully Bill O'Reilly? Who cares? I don't like either one of them. They're both should be deleted. They should go to YouTube and get banned for life. Anyway, that's what you have today. So I think that this is tongue-in-cheek. John Kennedy came from Navy Intelligence. He came from the Office of Navy Intelligence. And PT-109, in case you didn't know, that's a spy boat to spy on logistics traffic for the Japanese. That's called Navy Intelligence. So John Kennedy is well aware of deception, concealment, people not who they present themselves as. So when he says profession, I mean, he's being very sarcastic. It's not a profession. It's a bunch of spooks who type up fake stories. I wouldn't call that a profession. I'd call it a bunch of scumbags. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. See, we don't have a free and open society, so I don't think that you could say it's repugnant anymore because it's just standard operating procedure. It's the minister of poppycock policy. Anyway, the word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we, as the people, are inherently and historically opposed to secret societies. Well, that's kind of a farce in San Francisco, where we have the Bohemian Club, the Olympic Club, the World Trade Club, the University Club, the Pacific Union Club, okay? Then we have the Masonic Auditorium across the street from the Flood Mansion, which is the Pacific Union Club, and you can't just have a group of people meet at the Masonic Temple on California Street without an appointment and a sponsor. And then we have Scottish Rites Temple out on 19th Avenue in the Sunset District. And then we have what is now a post office at 1849 Geary Street. That used to be a Scottish Rites Temple that San Francisco turned over to Jim Jones to create the People's Temple in San Francisco on or around 1966, 67, 68, People's Temple. The People's Temple is credited with getting George Moscone elected through illegal election fraud. That's how George Moscone became mayor of San Francisco in 1974, defeating Dianne Feinstein and defeating another person. And there was a lot of allegations that Jim Jones and the People's Temple bust people in from Ukiah, the Greenfield Ranch, which is a CIA operation, to vote in districts where they didn't live inside of San Francisco. In districts where George Moscone was polled at 12-to-1 ratio over his closest rival. 12-to-1. And look, in the United States of America, you can't get 12-to-1 in any topic. Nobody agrees 12-to-1 overwhelming. That's why the whole idea of a jury system is a joke. You can't get 12 people to agree on anything. And just so you know, we don't have a jury system. We have admiralty law. We're operating on maritime law in the United States. Almost no felonies ever go to trial, and very few cases are ever adjudicated by a jury because the system is totally dysfunctional and it won't work. Even without fixing and rigging it and destroying evidence, it won't work. So we function under maritime law, which is you're guilty until proven otherwise, which pretty much means you're guilty because you never get to prove otherwise. All right, so what I wanted to go on to tell you, and this is the crux of San Francisco, the city by the bay. This is the crux of what John Kennedy was trying to tell us. Today, no war has been declared. However, fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in a traditional fashion. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. The survival of our friends is in danger. And yet no war has been declared. No borders have been crossed by marching troops. No missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say that no war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of a clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear and its presence has never been more imminent. It requires a change in outlook, a change of tactics, a change in missions by the government, by the people, by every businessman of labor and labor leader, and by every newspaper. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War. In short, with a wartime discipline, no democracy would ever hope or wish to match. All right, that's enough of that. That sums up my relationship with Google, YouTube. Okay, they'll delete you. They're into censorship. They'll publish poppycock. They'll actually have videos up there that they won't delete that are false, right? That's a fact. So Google is not a disinformation purveyor. They're a poppycock propaganda purveyor. They have no clue what is true and what is false. They follow a script because they're part of the military industrial complex operated on the satellite system, which is run by Lockheed, which is a military industrial war contractor. And all the politicians are completely fraudulent. You know, we went over, yesterday, the mayor of San Francisco. There's been 45 mayors of the city of San Francisco. They have all been controlled, all of them. And we went over the district attorney. I mean, we have a child in there now, Brooke Jenkins, no birth date, age 34, 35, I guess. I don't know. And she's only been the district attorney for a couple of months. She was appointed on, I believe, July 8th. And right after the Paul Pelosi drunk driving in Napa County, Brooke Jenkins became the district attorney of San Francisco. She's going to have to win an election here in the next 3 days, I guess on Tuesday, because she's not officially the district attorney. She's on probation, and she's not qualified to do the job. However, it doesn't matter because there is no district attorney of San Francisco. It's always a political clandestine services control position, just like the mayor's office is, just like the city police chief is controlled. Bill Scott, yeah, I'm talking about you. Okay? I listened to a 6-7 minute press conference you gave a week ago, and I didn't understand a thing you said. I understood nothing you said. And we've had a week go by, and nothing that, this gobbledygook that you spewed out of your mouth was never corroborated. I have no hammer. I have no 9/11 recording. I have no San Francisco police body camera to depict your poppycock story that there was some person that opened the door that you won't identify. And you claim that Paul Pelosi's wrestling with an assailant with a hammer. That's poppycock. You have no proof of that. Your police officers didn't corroborate it. They've had 8 days to do that. They haven't. They won't produce their body cam. Neither will you. You won't produce the 9/11 tape. So I think you're concealing the truth. And the truth is there was no hammer attack. That's like saying Charlie Manson murdered Sharon Tate. No, he didn't. Nobody ever said he did. Ever. Not even Ethel Younger, who was the district attorney at the time, who was OSS controlled. He never said Charlie Manson did it. Never. And Aaron Stovich was in charge of the trial, and he never said he did it. Nothing to do with no Vincent Bugliosi. He's busy stalking his milkman and punching his mistress in the nose. So he was kind of busy, with other felonious activities of his own making. Not to mention he was the least experienced person in the district attorney's office at the time of the Manson trial. Vincent Bugliosi, I think, was on his 4.5 year. It's kind of like a Brooke Jenkins, who's, I don't know how many, she quit her job. I mean, she quit the DA's office and stole some files. I wouldn't exactly hold her up as a good example of a deputy district attorney. She doesn't know the policy. She stole the files. She quit her job. She's a political appointee. And don't look for the DA's office. Don't look there for leadership. Don't look to the mayor for leadership. Don't look to the chief of police for leadership. What you have is anarchy. You have anarchy in San Francisco, which is by design. Operation Chaos entered San Francisco in 1965. Look at this. You've got Dianne Feinstein. You've got Nancy Pelosi presiding over weddings with no face diapers. You've got Paul Pelosi, a drunk driver, crashing into innocent, hardworking people. You have Timothy Leary, issuing those infamous words in 1967, tune in, turn on, drop out. You have Patty Hearst living in Haight Ashbury in two different homes. You have the Grateful Dead. You have Janis Joplin, who also got murdered in Los Angeles on Franklin Avenue, but she was living in Haight Ashbury, San Francisco, about a mile away from where Harvey Milk's camera store was in 1974. Do you see this? That Harvey Milk lives in the Castro within 1 mile of where Patricia Hearst is in a safe house at Haight Ashbury near St. Ignatius High School. You know, where Paul Pelosi went to school. You know, where the Zodiac killed Paul Stein, a yellow cab driver in Presidio Heights, where Nancy Pelosi and Paul Pelosi resided, in that neighborhood, where Sharon Tate's father resided next door to that neighborhood in the Army Presidio Army base, which is the same neighborhood. It's the same neighborhood. It's walking distance. It's a joke. San Francisco is a CIA experiment base where they took Paul Pelosi for his alleged fractured skull to CIA hospital, the Zuckerberg General Hospital. That's where David Smith worked with mice and LSD and amphetamines to see like what would happen. It's where Timothy Leary works. That's where the Sandler Institute is. That's where Brooke Jenkins makes her home in Mission Bay, where the Sandler Neuroscience Institute is. Everywhere you go in San Francisco, there is some kind of CIA operation going on in those different neighborhoods. The Castro, Haight Ashbury, Presidio Heights, Presidio Army Base, Letterman Hospital. Let's see, what else? The Financial District, Bank of America, Nob Hill, the Masonic Auditorium, the Fillmore Auditorium, the Scottish Rites Temple, the Flood Mansion, the University Club, yeah, the Bohemian Club on Taylor Street, south of Market, China Basin. Anyway, you should know that when George Moscone was assassinated, they buried him in the Colma Catholic Holy Cross Cemetery. So you got Abigail Folger, Enos Mejia, her mother, George Moscone are all buried there, along with some of my relatives. And then you have Sharon Tate buried in the Holy Cross Catholic Cemetery in Culver City. Yeah. And then you have Dr. Victor Oda, his wife Virginia, his eldest daughter Tara, his two sons Taggart and I forgot the other son's name. That's 5. They're buried in the Holy Cross Catholic Cemetery in Santa Cruz. So that's 5. And you got 3 in Colma. And then you got 1 in Culver City. So what's that add up to? 9? That's 9 CIA operatives who were murdered. Well, Enos Mejia wasn't murdered. She died at age 100, which I think is a little bit further in, she was a private banker for CIA, and it looks a lot like Paul Pelosi might be too. He's 82. So he's got another 18 years to go to get up to Enos Mejia, Abigail Folger's mother. I don't know if he's going to make it or not. It's not looking good for Paul Pelosi. Not at all. I mean, he's got an almost fatal drunk driving crash. He's in violation of his parole, it looks like to me. He might be getting a visit from the Napa County Sheriff's Department if they can figure out which house he lives in Pacific Heights. My recommendation is that the Napa County Sheriff try Pacific Avenue. I think you'll have better luck rounding up Paul Pelosi on or around. Just look for a home with 4 garages. There are very few homes in Pacific Heights that have 4 garages, and I think Paul Pelosi might have the keys to that one. Thanks for listening, and just let me know. I'm going to circle back, and we're going to drill into Jim Jones, People's Temple, Jonestown, which is a complete CIA operation, and then, of course, its relationship with Dianne Feinstein, its relationship with Nancy Pelosi, who was having children at the time. So Nancy Pelosi wasn't necessarily full-time working with Jim Jones because she was busy with 5 children. So listen to me carefully. I'm not a dumbass. I understand dates and times. And I know that Paul Pelosi Jr. was born in 1969, and he's not the eldest Pelosi child. So the thing is that I realized that Nancy is the mother of 5 children. And I also realized that she was born into this clandestine world. She didn't volunteer. Just like Abigail Folger didn't volunteer either. Hey, and by the way, Nancy Pelosi, if you're listening, you know, Inés Mejia, her daughter was bayoneted 28 times with the M7 bayonet. And I'm here to tell you that's very traumatic. So I'm aware that you have children, which makes you compromised. That makes you compromised because I'm sure you understand that Inés Mejia, who lives in your neighborhood, or used to live in your neighborhood, that she had her daughter murdered by the CIA. So I'm sure that you are keenly aware as a mother that you have 5 children who could be murdered by the CIA. So I understand that you're in a pickle. I don't like anything comes out of your mouth because I know it's poppycock and I know it's a script. So I understand you're in a very bad situation, and so is Paul. Paul's in a bad situation too. But can't you tell that it's not your children that the CIA seems to be fascinated on? They're fascinated on your husband, who you're not really living with. Paul Pelosi. He looks like he is in a spiral. He is spiraling down, just like Wolf Krajanka, Bill Graham was. CIA worked with Bill Graham in San Francisco for 25 years. They gave him a beautiful home in Corte Madera with a spectacular view above Tiburon. And then they whacked him in a helicopter crash at age 61. So, you know, look, if you're 82 years old, you're 21 years past Bill Graham's death. 21 years older than when Bill Graham was when he died, when he was murdered. Okay? Gary Powers was murdered at age 47. Abigail Folger was murdered at 25. John Benet Ramsey, whose father worked for CIA, she was murdered at age 6. So, you know, when you're 82 years old, you are well past your shelf life. Roberta Calfi, murdered at 62 years old. Michele Sedona, murdered at age 66. Again, not 82, 66. William Colby, the director of CIA, murdered at age 76. Okay? Timothy Leary died at age 75. They didn't make it to age 82. So you're on the home stretch, no matter how you slice it. All right, take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.